Hey guys, I don't know if you can hear that little twinge of guilt in my voice, but I feel bad. I haven't made any content in a while. The truth is, I have just been super busy. In the past 10 weeks or so, I had my first multi-million dollar exit, which was very exciting. There was like an earnout and lawyers and executives and accountants, you name it. It was a very comprehensive process. We got it across the finish line though. Really exciting. My parents bought me a bottle of champagne that I did not pop. I was back at my desk as soon as that deal closed, and I was solving for a problem that we were experiencing as the consulting business was continuing to grow. Namely, I built an internal tool to help streamline our operations, and I accidentally made it good. So good that it's ready to go to market. Like awkwardly so. It's awkward because I didn't intend to build another product. It was sort of just a byproduct of solving my own problem. And so now, right now, what I want to do is basically walk you through my decision making apparatus. I want to talk through how I'm evaluating this opportunity. I'll give you guys a sneak peek of the product too. My goal by the end of this video is for you guys to understand all of the different ways that you can use AI and workflow automation in order to make money, either by consulting or doing any number of different things like developing a product. We'll talk a lot about those kind of two routes. Also, I don't want to play the whole game of dumping a bunch of like social proof and Stripe screenshots or having some hook. This video is just going to be super dense and action packed. And with that being said, here is what I'm thinking. So I basically outlined a bunch of different topics that I want to speak to. You guys can see them here, and we'll talk about all of this. And then as a jumping off point, I just went through and outlined a couple of key points that I want to make sure that I make. But as we go through all of this and talk about the market opportunity and how to get started building automations and all of that good stuff, I will basically backfill some information and we'll add to this graph. But before I do that, I realized that, hey, you guys might have no idea who I am. So if you're seeing my content for the first time, if this is the point at which our quantum timelines are officially becoming entangled, hi, my name is Josh. So back in December of 22 and Jan 23, I became totally enamored with the idea of building automation using predominantly no-code tools. The GPT-3 API had just come out, and I recognized that we were at the very beginning of what was going to be this incredible platform shift. And with that, all of a sudden, the economics of SaaS were changing to the extent that businesses without a crazy amount of scale could otherwise afford now for the first time really to have someone come in and build bespoke tech. And so that's what I started doing. Pretty soon after I learned the basics of Zapier and make.com and fiddled around with N8N and Airtable and a couple of tools that we'll talk about, I took on my first client. So I would say the learning curve was probably 4 to 6 weeks. And really I could have taken on my first client sooner if I wasn't dealing with this like mountain of imposter syndrome that I have still not totally solved for, but that's okay because we're not going to let perfection be the enemy of execution, and I'm just going to keep trucking along. Anyway, we're going to fast forward through a lot here. And basically, one client led to the next client, led to the next one. And all of a sudden, I had this book of business that I was servicing. I started to scale up my team. I would bring in people that were way smarter than me and learn from them. And now, present day, I basically monetize AI and automation in a couple of ways. So the way that I make money predominantly is through consulting. I also have a mentorship program. I don't really talk about it ever. Maybe I'll drop the link down below, but just so you guys know, it's not like a scaled thing. This isn't some school community. We built our own platform. We work with a handful of people at any given time. We do tons of one-on-ones. The resource library is like 30 hours. It's just not your typical online offer. And so to that extent, don't even worry about this. We work with just so few people. So maybe it's a fit, maybe not, whatever. The other way that we make money is with productized services. So as we have been developing different solutions on a one-to-one basis for our clients, what'll happen is we'll recognize, hey, this thing that we built for an electrician actually could be adapted to help all other home service businesses. And we could refactor and retool this thing and make it available to contractors or roofers or you name it. And so that is like an extension of the consulting work that we do, wherein we'll solve for an individualized problem set and then validate the market, recognize if there's more ubiquity, use that in order to harden the product a little bit more, and then retool it so that it can accommodate more scale. And sometimes that will be a productized service that's largely kind of copy and paste, but then otherwise tweaked. In other cases, it will be a more scalable solution akin to a traditional SaaS product. And then lastly, a new channel that we are thinking about opening up would be an OF account. I have seen the numbers and the cash flow is just redonkulous. So with that being the case, you guys can just let me know in the comments if you think this would play, if you would buy it. How this ties into AI and automation, I have absolutely no idea. That shitty joke aside, let's get into it. And again, remember the question that we are going to be solving for predominantly here is, do I bring my SaaS to market? This is the big question that we are trying to answer. And I'm going to do so out loud, really for myself, but also for you guys, because in finding our answer to this question, what I think is going to happen is you're going to see really clearly the scale and urgency associated with this market opportunity. I jotted down a handful of questions that I wanted to answer as we went through this video. And the first one I kept a little bit more open-ended because I just think it'll be a really helpful jumping off point in order for us to ground our collective understanding in what it looks like to actually do this, but also why we are choosing to do this out of all the other options that are potentially available to us. So the merits associated with starting an agency or a consulting business are relatively obvious to the extent that these types of businesses are incredibly cash flow positive, meaning when we are running our agency, we might be bringing in third-party developers or no-code experts in order to help us with the fulfillment, but we can do so in a cash flow positive way. Effectively, these are just really meaningful lifestyle businesses. When you have a high value skill set that you can offer to people, it means that there's not that much fixed overhead, right? For me to operate this business, even at scale where we're servicing maybe 8 clients at a time, given we're a small team still, the ongoing costs that we bear are maybe $500 a month. And I'm just anchoring high because really it should be lower than that. But regardless of that, I want to just continue to take you through my thinking. So in the year 2025, as far as I'm concerned, there are really only 2 types of businesses at a high level. You have businesses that are basically benefiting from all of the incremental gains that are being created every single day in the AI ecosystem. And we'll double back to this in a sec. And then you have what I'll just broadly refer to as legacy businesses, where the ongoing day-to-day activities or the business model is relatively siloed from all of the innovation happening in the AI market. And I'll just use an example to anchor this point. So the other day, Anthropic releases Claude Sonnet 4 and Opus 4. And if you are like me and you are leveraging AI throughout your day-to-day, plus you have a business model that is intrinsically tied to the performance of these different AI models, what happened is basically overnight, all of a sudden you became, let's call it just conservatively, 5 to 10% more effective, more efficient, more productive, right? And you didn't really have to do anything. You didn't go out of your way in order to create these incremental productivity gains. They were almost just airdropped into your business because all of a sudden now, and these benchmarks, just take them with a huge grain of salt because they came straight from Anthropic. As people do third-party and independent testing, we'll have a better sense of really how well these things are performing against the incumbent models. With that aside, the point still stands that simply because of the construction of our business and business model, we are harvesting all of these gains without really doing anything. And the reason that's so meaningful and important is because in a post-GPT-3 world, what we're seeing is this unbelievable increase in performance associated with the models. It's not that we are just in the midst of this blistering wave of innovation. At some point, things are going to taper off. Maybe we'll hit some theoretical compute limit where we simply need nuclear in order to power all these data centers. And until then, we're not going to see like the crazy step increases just continue. But I don't really know about that because I think these models are going to continue to get more efficient and will get better at generating synthetic data sets, and will continue to find a way to increase model performance with like just smaller training cycles. Nonetheless, all of the productivity gains that we're just anecdotally observing over here in our day-to-day life, those are compounding. So the pace of innovation, it feels so fast right now, but it's only going to continue accelerating because of that compounding effect. And I think this graph does just a really nice job of demonstrating this sort of compounding effect that I am trying to speak to, but probably not doing a good job of, in the sense that we're approaching this like insane asymptote, the Cambrian explosion of these AI products that we've seen. It's just nowhere near finished. And so recentering just back to the initial kind of question that we were asking in deciding, hey, what kind of business should we consider starting? I don't see a world wherein these businesses that aren't getting better every single day without doing anything by nature of this dynamic are going to be able to compete in the long run. And when we have a choice to do basically anything, why would we shy away from tech? The one quick call out that I do want to make is that if you are considering maybe not going this route and pursuing AI and automation in whatever capacity, I would highly recommend indexing on creativity. I think that those are the businesses that have maybe a fighting chance at subsisting outside of this paradigm. And that's simply because humans are always going to be drawn towards other humans. And one of the things that makes a person a human is this ability to think in a very associative way. Simply put, if you're able to say the thing that the predictive text model otherwise wouldn't, there will continue to be a premium placed on that. And maybe that premium will actually grow. And so I consider these to be your two options if you want to think really strategically about next steps. Okay, now if you're sitting here and you're thinking, hey, I don't have any background in tech, I have no idea how to write code, I don't think this is a viable path or something that's available for me to really pursue. The good news is that I also have no traditional background in tech. I wouldn't call myself a developer. However, maybe I am in this sort of self-taught way. Effectively, the difference between knowing how to code and not knowing how to code is it's becoming totally obfuscated. The distinction between these two things isn't what it used to be. Whereas it maybe used to feel like this space was really wide and crossing this chasm of sorts was a huge undertaking. But now, just like all other knowledge work, effectively, as these AI models get more performant, there's a certain commoditization that's happening at the actual syntax layer of writing code. And instead, the premium is being placed not on true developers, but on people who can think through the problem sets a business is facing and then marry that with a broader kind of holistic understanding of the tech ecosystem. When I got started doing this, I made a very conscious decision to focus on building solutions in no code because I found that in the no code ecosystem, I was able to build really efficiently in a way that was cost effective for SMBs without making certain sacrifices or trade-offs in terms of durability or security or functionality. And that was revelatory at the time. But now what I'm finding is that the difference between no code and code, there's a convergence that's happening wherein like all roads are leading to just being able to build almost anything with plain English. And again, just a higher order understanding of how these different systems actually work. Great. Hopefully all of that makes sense. But I'm sure now the question that you're asking is, where is the money in all of this? And I want to talk about that right now. However, as it pertains to my life outside of this little square that you're watching me on, I have to jump to a meeting really quickly, and then I will resume filming this video. And we will talk about exactly how to basically leverage this skill set in order to actually drive revenue. And in doing that, we'll talk through the decision as to whether or not I should bring my product to market, and also how you can leverage all of these playbooks in order to get started driving revenue on your own. So I will be back in a sec. Maybe you'll notice a little difference in the lighting, maybe not. Regardless, just stay right here because this is where it's about to get good. I'm back. Missed you guys, and welcome to my office here in Flatiron in downtown New York City. Okay, so I just banged out that call. It was a great reminder that we are building some really cool stuff and probably not charging enough for it. We usually work on a 10K, like rolling 30-day retainer. But yeah, we should be charging way more in certain cases. And often we will scale up to a 20K monthly retainer in certain instances. Sometimes we'll work for less money also. It really just depends, but generally we probably fall around that like low 5-figure range. Anyway, let's jump back into this. So I did also skim through the recording from before, and I realized I'm not moving through this nearly fast enough. But we are at the same time making some really good progress, and hopefully you guys are vibing with everything that I'm sharing. All right, we're going to check this off. We talked about the opportunity set, and now let's talk about really what monetization looks like with this skill set. So I mentioned that we are currently making money in a couple different ways, predominantly consulting and then these productized services. And I want to give you somewhat of a framing for what both of these look like. Before we do, really quick, I'm just noticing that the notes I made here are somewhat salient. So shocking for me at least. But consulting, it's really fantastic because when we're selling an individualized solution, it means that the product market fit is really tight. We're basically building for a market of one. And with that, it just makes it an incredibly compelling sales proposition. We'll talk about the PMF cheat code over here. But otherwise, when it comes to actually scaling these consulting businesses, they can become a little bit more operationally rigorous, meaning that we only have so much time in a day. I only have so much time. I can work with a handful of clients, but beyond a set number of clients, all of a sudden now we need to start pulling in additional people, and that creates some complexity, all of which is solvable. It's actually something that pains me really frequently. I'll think about the fact that building out our team and scaling the consulting side of what we do, there is a known solution. Deloitte and PwC and all of these big consulting giants, they have found a way to repeatedly onboard new talent, staff them on projects, keep people happy, and drive a shit ton of revenue. And it really just bothers me to no end that we haven't operationalized in a way that can support that kind of scale just yet. And the contrast is that there are sometimes problems that we'll have to solve where the solution is non-obvious. Maybe someone hasn't done that thing that we're trying to do before, and so the roadmap to accomplish it is relatively sticky. That's not the case here. And that is why I get really frustrated with myself when we're running into these constraints in having a bunch of clients come to us being like, hey, we want your services, and having to turn some of them away simply because we just don't have the bandwidth to take them on. The merits of going the productized service or SaaS route are pretty obvious in the sense that when you have a one-size solution fits most or all, it makes it really easy in a certain sense to scale. However, finding that initial product market fit is much, much more challenging. Granted, there is a way to do it by marrying this strategy with the consulting that we'll talk about basically right now. Anyway, let's ground our understanding in what these two kind of different types of products look like. So with the consulting work that we do, we might be building out something like this. So this is a solution that we built for a client. They run a car calibration business that basically sells equipment to car and like auto body shops. The business model is relatively arcane, and there are parts of it that I understand, that are parts of it that are a little bit of a black box for me. Regardless, we built out this solution for them that helps them manage their invoicing in a way more efficient way. Like, we created a shit ton of time savings, and in that, a commensurate and really meaningful amount of value. And the reason we chose to build this out in Make is because it allowed us to implement our solution in a very time efficient way so that we could just get it standing up for their business, recognizing, one, that there was a cost they were facing for every day that this didn't exist, but also that this was a workflow we were likely going to iterate on, and developing it in this way didn't necessitate us sacrificing any amount of functionality or durability or longevity. It actually streamlined things and took a lot of the like unnecessary kind of considerations off of our plate. But to that extent, there's no reason that we couldn't otherwise build this in a traditional like development environment. At the end of the day, when we're building with no code, we're doing the exact same thing that a developer would otherwise be doing in a space like this. Whether we're using AI to help us craft syntax, or we are working with a bunch of colorful make modules, we're doing the same thing. We're creating a programmatic solution. It just so happens that the interfaces are different, meaning that there's a certain amount of abstraction with these no-code tools that make it really easy for us to just move quickly But the mechanics that underpin a solution like this versus this one are quite literally identical, presuming that we are developing the same thing. You could see that just by exporting a given blueprint. If we now look at that export, and this is a little confusing because it opened it up in the same window where we have this other project, but nonetheless, you can see blueprint 11. And this is the actual JSON that is sitting under our colorful modules. This is what it looks like to develop a one-to-one solution for a consulting client working on a monthly retainer basis. And it's an incredibly compelling way to drive revenue, because all of a sudden we build something like this, and then that leads to the next feature that they want on top of this, or the next problem that they want us to solve elsewhere in their business. And there is just no shortage of companies that are out there looking for people to do exactly this. It's funny, when I got started, I was nervous that, hey, maybe I'll be able to find my first or my second client, but then am I just going to have to get lucky in order to find the next one? And ironically, the biggest problem is, again, just this friction that we're facing operationally, because there are so many SMBs that are looking for people with this skill set. Anyways, now let's take a look at what a productized service or SaaS solution might look like. So this is an app that I built, and what it does is basically generate graphics from React templates. So React is a web development framework that allows you to create like very visually appealing websites, coupled with a bunch of different libraries and whatever. It's just a very popular front-end web dev platform. And basically what occurred to me is that we could create mini websites that have very purposeful and specific graphics that could then be exported and used in video content. So because we're generating these assets with React, it means that all of the text, everything that you see on screen is totally customizable. I'll just show you this example of a template that could be exported. This is designed to look just like Notion, so that if you were creating a video and maybe you had a number of different things that you wanted to put on like a list, some key points that you were making. Imagine if I wanted to visually represent all of the data that I'm trying to like communicate through here, I could basically lay that out in, look, so like I could say, this is a test. And then when we preview it, now we have our content there. So you can imagine that the next step would be to create an API so that you could generate these programmatically. You could give a model a script, and then it could determine what the key points you're trying to make are, and then it could match that to a given template or a series of templates in a family. Anyway, it's super cool. The reason that I built it is, one, because I have been making more content and I found it like really cumbersome to try and make the content high fidelity to the extent that it had a bunch of graphics, because it just took forever. Or I would work with an editor, but then I wouldn't be happy with the edits and the content would no longer feel authentic. And on top of that, I had a client who runs a graphic design agency. They do lots of video editing and stuff. And so I basically ran this idea past him. He was like, this would be insane if it worked. And then I developed this. And right now it is still in a pretty nascent state. And the reason that I haven't pushed to bring this thing all the way across the finish line is in part because I could bring this to market, but I have no idea whether or not there is real demand for this. In order for me to feel comfortable basically pursuing this strategy, like bringing a SaaS to market as opposed to just taking on more consulting clients, I need to feel pretty confident that there's actual demand for this thing that I'm working on, because the opportunity cost of turning down a 20K retainer in order to develop a thing that no one ends up using is just really high. To that extent, though, I mentioned before that there was a way for us to basically use the consulting projects that we do as a sort of quasi sandbox in order to validate a given market and determine if we actually did want to invest the time. And so this is effectively that playbook, where we find a client that would benefit immediately from us building our solution or a solution very similar to ours, but adapted for their needs. And we develop it as quickly as possible while capturing all the core functionality, using no code, and then we actually deploy it out in the real world. We gauge how people are using it, how performant it is, how valuable it is, and then we determine, hey, what do we need to fix? And beyond that, is there an opportunity for us to maybe retool this thing and make it available to more and more users? And this is a really powerful framework for building technology because it allows us to drive revenue from the outset of our project. We don't have to sleep in an office building under a desk. We can make good money servicing clients. But on top of that, it gives us real world insights as to the stories and user behaviors and features that we need to support in order for this thing to actually get adopted. That's the hard part about bringing a product to market. It's usually not the tech. If you're not technical, you can find someone who's technical. There is a massive surplus of developers who are looking for work right now. There are so many amazing products that exist from a technical standpoint that just never hit critical mass or escape velocity. And it's almost always because they just didn't have product market fit, which is why this is such a cheat code. The product market fit cheat code, as I like to refer to it. And just keep in mind that the reason you've probably never heard anyone talk about this is because this is a novel and basically brand new phenomenon. Without AI and the robustness of the no-code ecosystem existing, we wouldn't be able to work in this way. Meaning this playbook didn't exist 5 years ago. It just wasn't possible to execute in the way that it is now. It was just too expensive and slow and clunky, but the world has changed a lot. Okay, fantastic. So I think that checks our box on this next question, and we bled into question number 3. I still haven't shown you the product that I am focused on potentially bringing to market. So I'll do that in just a sec. And just doing a little bit of cleanup here. There are 2 points that I want to make super quick, I promise. The first one is that in this new AI world order, we can now build so much, so efficiently in almost any direction. That's amazing, but it also creates a certain paradox of choice. I don't know if that's a term. It's a trap in a lot of ways, because what'll happen is we'll end up following our own biases or pursuing something that maybe isn't validated but is more fun to work on. And for that reason, I have been really dogmatic about trying to stay as focused as possible on the consulting work, recognizing that is the conduit to some of these more scalable outcomes faster, even though it seems counterintuitive because it's an indirect, almost backdoor to finding the problem that people want to spend money on that we can otherwise solve. Okay, now the second point that I just want to make again really quickly, I talked about this before, but these consulting deals are, 1, all over the place, and 2, they are really easy in a lot of ways to close, because when we're sitting with a business owner, explaining what it is that we do, demoing a product, learning about the intricacies of how they operate, and then basically selling a solution back to them that's custom tailored to solve the problem that they self-identified as the most pressing thing holding their business back. It's almost unfair, coupled with the amount of excitement and demand in this space. When we're building bespoke too, it means that we have a ton of maneuverability, which is counter to what happens when we develop a product and all of a sudden now we've put down these roots that, if placed just so, can be incredibly fruitful, but otherwise just comes with a whole barrel of execution risk that we talked about. I don't want to be redundant. All of this is just to say that if you're interested in making money tomorrow, don't build a product, do consulting. If you care about making money the next month, the month after, consulting, don't build a product. If you are interested in having some crazy outsized return, okay, then we can talk about building a product, but start with consulting. I'm not your mom. Listen to me, don't listen to me. It doesn't matter. I'm just hammering this point because I have so much conviction in this strategy, having run it and made a ton of money from it over the course of the past couple years. You might notice that I don't speak super definitively about everything I mention. I like to imbue a ton of nuance into what I say, but when it comes to just making money, I spend day and night thinking about little else, and this playbook is the one. Let's say you launch a product. Maybe you have 500 users. They're all paying $10 and the product is mediocre, but whatever, that's an awesome outcome. Now you have $5,000 that you just made from your product. Great. 500 is a lot of people. Congratulations. On the other side of that, though, you also could just take on a client for $10,000, work for 1 month, and now you just made double the amount of money. Let's even say that your first client isn't $10,000. Maybe it's $3,000. Maybe it's $2,000. So you're making effectively half of what you would made in our counterfactual SaaS outcome. The time investment that it would take you to get there is nominal compared to launching your SaaS, presuming that it's robust and has auth and a couple of different features. So just take all that in, do what you want with that information. Otherwise, I'm afraid that this video is getting super long. And so with that, I honestly feel like we made a bunch of the points here that I otherwise wanted to talk about. The 3 ways to build, we discussed that. We lumped productized services in with SaaS. The amount of urgency that I feel day to day, I think that's probably just woven into everything, and you guys can almost feel me emanating that. Part of why it has to be now, is because I tend to think that along with everything else, human effort is at risk of being commoditized by these AI models. And I am a really hard worker. I think that I measure some of my self-worth against what I'm able to accomplish from a monetary standpoint. I'm not saying that's healthy. If you can avoid that, you should. I also have this really corrosive sort of ambition where I just want to build something and achieve. And with that, I'm willing to sacrifice so many other aspects of my life. And that's totally okay. That works for me. And that has allowed me to separate from the herd and achieve, again, just some amount of success, quantify it however. I just worry that this dynamic might change and human effort might no longer be correlated. Not that it is per se, but like the right type of effort might no longer be correlated with success, because we're going to have these LLMs that are basically just working at our level, running at all times without the same biological needs for food and water and love present in the way that they are for us. See, if I could get a Neuralink inserted into my brain that basically made it so I was able to function without having any social engagement in my life whatsoever, and I could just sit here and work, and I'm like not far from that point, that would be pretty convenient. And even still, given the fact that I need to poop and ingest calories, like I think I would still be at a deficit. Plus, forget about the fact that I only have so much time and I'm only able to absorb information at a certain speed that is way slower than a model. Granted, for now, I have more active working memory, but I have a feeling that's going to change. Okay, so now just putting a pin on all of this, it has not been my intention in this video to tease out showing you the product, because now I have a sneaky suspicion it's going to seem super underwhelming. I also don't really know how to talk about it efficiently just yet, because I haven't had to put together an elevator pitch or otherwise really dial in the angle or the target market or any of these different things. We run a consulting business. We needed a way to efficiently onboard, offboard, and manage team members. And coupled with that, we needed a written history of everything that was happening across our organization so that we could then give all that context to a model in order for it to be effective. Those two things, like that's why I built this. Onboard, offboard, manage efficiently, written history for the model, because the quality of the data that we can put in on like an individual prompt basis is going to determine how performant the agent is at helping us on the other side of that. Cool. So with that being said, I am starting this up locally right now. We have it running in production, but we're using it. And so there is data that is like somewhat sensitive. And when we run it locally, we have, what's it called? Just like a bunch of dummy data that's available. So this is intended to be a really lightweight task management tool that allows you to easily log your activities and the projects that you're working on and the tasks, and to just see everything that you would otherwise need to in order to be effective in your day-to-day. You can keep track of resources. I have basically built this thing entirely myself, and so there hasn't been like a designer that we've brought in order to make any of the screens look good. Take all of this with a big grain of salt. And again, just keep in mind that the second big call out I made as it related to the agent having context so that it could be functional, This integrates with Slack. I don't want to bother pulling up Slack right now and making sure that there's stuff that's sensitive that's covered. Just keep in mind that there are a number of different pieces of this project. And the most important layer would be the actual database, like the design of our data structures. What we're looking at here is basically just a front end interface for all of the data that we have sitting in Postgres. But the intention here is for the agentic layer where the model actually like executes to be so efficient that a user maybe doesn't even need to come into the front end at all, because they are basically just able to query in plain English, hey, what's going on with this project? What's the status of this? Has anyone requested anything from me? And then get back actionable information so that they can just go do the work. It's basically like an anti-task management tool that is frictionless as possible while also still having features that make it valuable. Anyway, I'll do a way more comprehensive demo for you guys at some point when I am actually interested in bringing this to market. For now, I might have not connected all of the dots perfectly because I feel like I suck at content creation. But my focus is really on just continuing to service our clients, because that's where we make money and that's where we will be able to basically fold a product like this into their organization and then gauge based on real world insights whether or not this is something we actually want to pursue. Anecdotally, we found it to be super helpful as an internal tool so far. If any of you guys are really interested in maybe playing around with it, let me know in the comments and we could do like a closed beta type thing. Otherwise though, yeah, it's working really closely with everyone that we take on the mentorship side, and then the consulting, that's the priority, at least for now, until we get more data. When that will be, I don't know. Maybe a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, maybe next year. Anyways, I hope you guys found this interesting, and I hope that there were some actionable takeaways here. I speak with a lot of conviction, like I mentioned, just in part because all of this is derived from my actual firsthand experience. It's not theoretical, it's not whatever. This business model has just completely changed my life and opened doors for me and opportunities and relationships that I, one, feel so grateful for, and two, would have had trouble even imagining 24 months ago. And so with all that, I will see you guys really soon. I promise that content is a priority for me. I think that distribution is something that's going to be increasingly important as these models get more performant too. And so I have a ideological motivation or incentive to continue sharing everything with you guys. I'll see you really soon. And yeah, until next time, just keep building. But don't build too much, because that is only one piece of this puzzle. Prospecting, selling, scoping, all equally, if not more important.